Most organizations deploying AI are not facing a technology problem, they're facing a governance problem.
The boards that don't appreciate their AI exposure are going to be the ones that get caught out.
What is the single most broken thing inside most organizations right now?
That's a really great question, Randy.
This is the TechDental podcast, the strategic intelligence hub for leaders shaping the dental industry. We break down how AI, data, and operating discipline drive performance and scale. I'm Dr. Randeep. Let's dive in. Most organizations deploying AI are not facing a technology problem, they're facing a governance problem. And until boards understand that distinction, the tools will never deliver the returns being promised. Today's conversation sits at the intersection of AI strategy, board-level governance, and organizational readiness. My guest has spent her entire career advising global organizations from the NHS to Harrods to Virgin on how to integrate emerging technology in ways that actually hold under pressure. She's been voted leading AI strategist, top 10 AI influencer, and most inspiring woman in technology. She sits on the UK government PPG, advises the AI Ethics Journal, and her books are cited by the World Economic Forum as board-level references. Katie King, welcome to TechDental.
Great introduction. Thank you so much, Randeep. Pleasure to be here.
Katie, technology adoption is easy. Governance discipline is rare. The real differentiator is not access to tools, but clarity of ownership and oversight. There's a pattern I see repeatedly in dental organizations that have bought AI tools and found them underwhelming. The tools work, but the organization does not know how to hold them accountable. Most leaders say they have an AI strategy, but what actually distinguishes a real strategy from expensive experimentation?
Yeah, that's a really great place to start, to be honest with you. I see this everywhere across heavily regulated sectors, healthcare, financial services, but also retail and the public sector. And most organizations confuse AI activity with having an AI strategy. So it might be some pockets of experimentation, a chatbot over here or a pilot project there. But when there's no coherent plan that's actually connecting all of these initiatives to business outcomes, that's the problem. So I see three things. A real AI strategy has got clear ownership at board level. It's got defined use cases that are tied to measurable value. And thirdly, a governance layer that's ensuring that really important accountability.
It strikes me that the governance gap is structural. So where exactly do you think boards misunderstand AI risk and responsibility?
I think the biggest misunderstanding comes from those boards, management teams that are treating the AI risk as an IT concern. I see it as a boardroom concern. When you're deploying AI in these sectors like dentistry, you're making decisions about patients' data, about clinical recommendations, consent, liability all come into play. They're not IT decisions, they are governance decisions. So I think that this landscape of policy is changing, and the boards that don't appreciate their AI exposure are going to be the ones that get caught out. This is not technology, this is regulatory responses and trust fundamentally. So the ones getting it right are those that have got AI governance with an owner at the C-suite level, not those that have buried it somewhere in their IT department. That's what I would say.
And in regulated sectors like dentistry, that gap has direct clinical and legal consequences. What governance layer must exist before any AI deployment in those highly regulated environments?
Absolutely. At a minimum, you need that data governance framework that spans the consent, the storage, the access. So you need a risk assessment process that's looking at each different AI use case. There might be, for example, clear accountability when, and I say when, not if, when the AI gets it wrong. You need the feedback loop so that the system can keep improving. And without those in place, you're flying blind when it comes to patient data. So I think that's really important.
Katie, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment. Most organizations treat governance as the thing that slows AI down. You are arguing that it is the thing that makes AI viable. But governance frameworks are often captured by the compliance function rather than the strategic leadership. Does governance first AI not risk becoming a sophisticated way to do nothing?
No, I think without it, you have lost the essence of what you're trying to achieve as a healthcare provider. You could look at other parts of the world where it's much more lax, and I think it is going to backfire. We've got to do things properly. If we're using AI across our stack in the way that we reach out and find new patients through our marketing and our CX, if we're using some AI in our everyday productivity, if we are using it in the delivery of our services, it's going to future-proof us. It's going to differentiate us from other dentists, for example, that aren't using it. So I think there's ways of using it as a real USP, as a way of growing our dental practices, our organizations, but we've got to do it in a way that's structured and responsible and safe. And so I think if we're using it in all those different ways, of course, responsibly, it's going to make a massive difference.
In my view, organizations that thrive will treat AI governance as a board level KPI, not an IT function. As we've been discussing, responsible AI is a phrase that has been largely captured by the compliance and ethics community. I want to pull it back into the operational and commercial world. What does responsible AI actually look like in practice inside an organization that is deploying it at scale beyond the policy documents and ethics statements?
Yeah, great question, Randeep. That's where a lot of organizations fall down. They'll publish a beautiful AI ethics statement. It will sit in a poster in the office or obviously digitally on their website and so on, but nothing changes operationally. So I think in practice, this responsible AI means every team is deploying AI. They have a checklist. They know that the model's been tested for bias. They know how they can reach out and explain its different outputs so they don't have that black box. They know what happens when a patient or a customer challenges perhaps a decision that's been made. So where it really comes into fruition is where it's embedded into the different workflows, the procurement decisions, the performance reviews, not just sitting randomly in some policy document up here outside of the organization or buried somewhere within.
Bias explainability and transparency are framed almost universally as compliance burdens. I think you would argue that they are strategic advantages. So walk our listeners through what that looks like commercially.
Absolutely. For me, and it's irrespective of your age, I'm 59, irrespective of your level of seniority, your years of experience, it's about mindset. So mindset shift is really important. Transparency is not a cost. It's a trust builder. And I think in healthcare, especially if your patients, your clients know that the AI that's supporting their care has been rigorously tested, that there's that human oversight, that they can ask how a recommendation has been made, that becomes your competitive advantage, your differentiator. So I think the dental practices that can hand on heart say we use AI responsibly and here's how, they're going to be the ones that are going to win the patient trust. So that connected advantage, I believe, comes from the transparency, the data governance, and the people readiness being a non-negotiable, not some kind of optional extra. That's really important.
Katie, let me give you the CEO test. A CEO asks you for the minimal viable AI governance framework for a 100-site dental group.
5 things. Number 1, a named AI lead at the board level, not delegated just to middle management. Number 2, a use case register or an AI use case register. What AI is being used, where it's being used, and by whom. Number 3, I would say a risk classification system. Not all AI is carrying the same risk and you triage that accordingly. 4, mandatory bias and impact assessments before you're doing any kind of patient-facing deployment. And then the final one, really important one, is a continuous feedback loop, so that you don't have governance as just a one-off audit, that you've got an ongoing discipline of using that. So those 5 things I would say fit to give that CEO that reassurance.
I love that. That's a really clear framework and workable for our listeners. And I think what you're really saying is that responsible AI is an operating discipline. It's not an ethics statement. But there's a counter case. The dental organizations making the most commercial progress with AI right now are often the early adopters. Does responsible AI first not simply hand competitive advantage to the organizations willing to take on more risk?
No, I don't think it does. Those taking the risk, those really innovating, might get some initial benefits from that. There might be a small competitive advantage, but the ability to really deliver it at scale is what's going to differentiate those that stay in and are successful in the short, medium and long term. And I don't think we're going to be successful in the medium and long term without that ethical playbook in mind. You might get, a small success over here, but when that's at scale across your marketing, the way you retain your patients, the way you actually deliver the services that you deliver, it's absolutely essential to that.
I like to reframe it slightly to illustrate a point. Is the most dangerous AI mistake a dental organization can make is not deploying the wrong tool, it's deploying the right tool into the wrong culture. You describe a shift from Industry 4.0, which was about machine efficiency, to Industry 5.0, which puts the human back at the center of the system. For a dental group scaling from 10 to 50 sites, that distinction is not abstract. What does it mean operationally?
I think it means, in a really simple way, we need to have all of our ducks in a row. We're all in the business of marketing. Marketing is about satisfying customer needs profitably. If the patient is at the center of everything that we're trying to achieve, we're thinking, how can we not just meet their needs? How can we excel? How can we exceed needs? Their expectations. So if that's at the center of everything we do, we're structuring our organization to meet that. But there's also the internal customer. So how are we attracting and retaining our staff? How are we looking after our patients in the best way possible? How are we doing so with our everyday productivity, so we're super efficient? How are we finding new clients by doing micro segmentation? So it's layered across the whole organization, and that client, customer, patient is essentially at the center of all of that. And that's what's going to differentiate us.
The organizations I see struggling with AI adoption are not lacking technology, they're lacking the cultural infrastructure to absorb it. What distinguishes AI mature organizations from those still struggling from your point of view?
Good question, actually. I would say 3 things there. An AI mature organization is going to treat the AI business-wide, not just a departmental project. This is about strategy, it's about people, it's about process, it's about governance. So there's that. They've got to invest in their AI readiness before they select a tool. That's really important. So they've got to have their clean, their labeled, their governed data. Otherwise, the AI tool's not going to come in and just save them. And they've got to measure their AI outcomes against some really clear KPIs, not how many models have we actually deployed, but what measure. And I think that will really resonate with your listeners. What measurable outcomes have we delivered? So I always get people thinking about, what are 3 problem areas in our practice that we have? Or what are 3 areas where we could grow it and where we could get really great incremental revenue?
Industry 5.0 is a compelling philosophy, but dental groups under margin pressure and workforce shortage sometimes do not have the luxury of culture-first transformation timelines. Is the human-centric AI argument not best suited to well-resourced organizations and something of a distraction for operators who are simply trying to keep the chairs full?
Great question. I think it's just really important that human first. And that for me means staff, all of the organization, and of course the patients first. I think to Simon Sinek, it's not what we do, it's not how we do it. Why do we do what we do? What are we actually in business for? What does success for our organization look like? If we have that people first attitude, I think that will help us differentiate ourselves. For example, I think back, I wrote my first book in 2019, second one in 22, and the third one came out in November. Going back a few years, people were being asked to just open up their shopping bag and buy some AI. When they did that without doing it in a strategic way, without doing it in a people-focused way, the mistakes that they made were often people-focused mistakes. They were buying tools that people hadn't been prepared for. And so staff were resisting it because they hadn't been communicated with. And clients weren't finding the tools and services that were being delivered very focused on the meeting of their needs. And so those projects failed. So when you don't have a people first, and that means client first and staff first approach to new technology like AI, it's going to potentially backfire.
I say this often, AI does not create clarity, it reveals whether clarity already exists. And I want to sit with something I hear from almost every AI leader I speak to. AI amplifies what already exists inside an organization. In a well-run group, it accelerates the good. In a poorly run group, it accelerates the mess. Leaders often ask whether AI replaces roles, but isn't the real question about redesigning decision rights?
Good question. I think people always ask me about job losses, and I believe a much more strategic question should be who's making which decisions and where can AI augment that decision making. That's a much more strategic question to be asking. In a dental group, for example, AI might flag anomalies in imaging, and they might do that faster than the human might do that. But the clinical decision needs to sit with the practitioner. So I think it's not about, is AI going to replace dentists? It's going to be, how do we redesign our workflows so that the dentist spends more time on the complex clinical judgments and less time on tasks that an AI could handle on their behalf? And that then helps address burnout, doing work that's much more strategic and gives them more pleasure and things that they were trained to actually deliver. It's really an evolution in the way that we work.
And how should organizations prepare their people before introducing AI systems?
I do a lot of this in my consulting work, but also in the workshops and in the keynotes that I give. And I typically talk around 2 or 3 key areas. So firstly, educate them. The fear comes from a lack of knowledge. So if we're going to run workshops so that team members know why we're doing that, not just what we're doing, that's the first. Second is involve them. So bring those clinical and those operational staff into some kind of selection and testing. Get them involved in that. Help them maybe even choose some of it. And then the third one is reassurance. How are we going to be really explicit about what the AI is going to do, what it is going to change? Because otherwise that ambiguity can really breed resistance amongst your team. So they would be the 3 key things that I would talk about there.
Katie, you've worked across healthcare, retail, and financial services. What patterns genuinely distinguish AI mature organizations from the ones that are still struggling with basic adoption?
Yes, you're right. Last year, I was in 14 different countries, spanning all different industry sectors. And I see, even though each sector is different, I still see some patterns. And I'd say there, again, seem to be lots of threes. 3 key things that stick out for me there. The AI mature organizations treat AI as a business-wide capability, not a departmental. So it's back to that strategy, data, people, process, and governance. They invest in data readiness before they select the tool. That's really important. They measure those outcomes against particular KPIs. So We're not talking vanity metrics here. We're not just talking numbers. We're talking, measurable deliverables. That's really important. Or else you're doing what people did back in 2019, just open up your shopping bag and buy some AI, jumping on the bandwagon, being very tactical. This is about strategic ways of working that are going to help you deploy at scale and make a major difference to your clients, your patients, to your staff, and to the competitive advantage, of your practice.
And the organizations you describe as AI mature are largely well-resourced enterprises with the corresponding budget to invest in culture and change management before deployment. Most dental groups are growing acquisitively, integrating practices under time pressure, and maybe cannot afford an 18-month readiness program. Is the AI mature framework you describe practically accessible to operators working at the speed the consolidation market demands?
Yes, I believe it is. And in fact, I was with a group of small businesses yesterday up in Manchester, and we were discussing, and many of them, it was peer to peer. So they were sharing their best practice and worst practice as well. And actually, many of them were saying this really enables us, this AI tool, it might be Copilot or Claude or a particular tool for HR. This means I no longer have to invest in this agency. This means I no longer have to have these 3 members of staff doing this. You don't have to be a huge organization in a really sophisticated way to be able to take advantage of this. You can be small, you can be nimble, but you've got real clarity about what you're trying to achieve. And these mean that you can punch above your weight and have the resources of a bigger team, because you're able to use these tools that are saving you hours of time and creating strategy documents and imagery and great slides and so on. So I'm talking everyday productivity. I'm talking excelling in the way that you deliver your services, but also in all the different job functions that every practice has to do.
If we shift a little bit to policy, the way I see it, policy is not a constraint. It's really a forcing function for maturity. You sit on the government all-party parliamentary group task force on the adoption of AI. You're on the editorial board of the AI and Ethics Journal. How should healthcare boards be preparing for the regulatory frameworks around AI that are currently tightening?
Great question, Randeep. I would say start now. Don't wait for that regulation to land on your desk. We know the direction of travel. It's clear. We need more oversight, more accountability, more transparency. We have the world's first binding law on AI in the EU AI Act. That's categorizing healthcare as a high risk for AI. And the UK is now developing its own frameworks. Other jurisdictions, of course, are going to follow. So I think healthcare boards, dental groups have got to be doing 3 things again, I would say. So audit every AI system that you've got in use, assess the ones that are touching the patient data or any clinical decisions, and obviously 3, put those governance wrappers in place before the regulators come asking. And without sounding too cynical, by being quite proactive, by actually helping shape and lead what that conversation might look like, you can actually get around the table and be a thought leader and shape that conversation and be really proactive. So I would say act now, be really proactive, take this really seriously and be ahead of the curve.
I've seen firsthand that regulation, it tends to consolidate advantage for the organizations that were already compliant and can sometimes create unintended barriers for smaller operators and new entrants. Does tightening AI regulation in healthcare ultimately protect patients, or does it entrench the position of large, well-resourced dental groups and disadvantage the independent practitioners who make up the majority of the UK dental workforce?
That's a good question. I think without that tight regulation and that and ethical approach to client data, if we don't have that, we lose everything. We lose our competitive advantage. I think the options open to small dental groups, but also to the major groups. It isn't just about oversight of the buying data. I think it's, as I've outlined, if I give you consent to use my data, I can benefit from that because you can give me a more personalized service, the way that you communicate with me, the way that you sell to me in all different areas, in dentistry, in retail, in the public sector. Without that trust, there's nothing. And then beyond that, if I then as a dentistry group can take advantage of AI in all different other layers of what I'm trying to achieve, I can gain the same benefits as a major buying group. So I think our approach in the UK, having a sort of barometer for the way that there is ethical use of AI, I don't see that as slowing things down. I think others that have maybe got a laxer approach to that will get slowed down midway through and then could have done irreparable damage. So I'm very much in favour of making sure that we've got checks and balances in place to make sure that we are trustworthy with that and ethical and so on.
Trust is key, and you've only got one chance to get it right, especially in a large organization. Katie, you've argued that the organizations most at risk from AI are not the ones that refuse to adopt it, but actually the ones that adopt it without fixing what's already broken. If that's true, what is the single most broken thing inside most organizations right now that AI will expose before it creates any advantage?
That's a really great question, Randeep. I think for a lot of organizations, what's broken is that they have a very tactical approach to the way that they run their organizations. It might be that they're constantly jumping on the bandwagon in that very tactical way, trying to catch up with others, trying to always think about what are we trying to achieve here, and not doing it in a way that embraces the whole organization. Those that don't do their research, those that constantly try to protect themselves and think we're going to be obsolete if we don't buy in this next tool or invest in this. So I think what's often broken is a way of running their organizations that is very tactical. And if they then do that by investing in whether it's Copilot or Claude or Concurred or an HR tool like HireView, it just exposes that further. So I think what I've seen in the last year is a much more strategic approach to this. What are 3 KPIs? What is success going to look like for us? It might be in our use of AI in the delivery of the services. It might be the way that we are doing our marketing to potential new clients. So when it's done in that strategic way, it can be game changing.
When historians write about this period of AI adoption in healthcare, what will they say about the organizations that got it right? And what will they say was the deciding factor that separated them from the ones that spent the money and got almost nothing back?
They will look back and they will say that the successful organizations were those that treated their customer or client data respectfully so that they maintained and built the trust with them. They will say that they were organizations that treated it holistically across the whole organization, didn't treat it as the next tech iteration, but saw it as something that was helping them to run their businesses in a profitable way across every stack: the HR, the marketing, the selling, the delivery of the services. So I would say it will be those organizations that treated it across the whole holistic organization.
Katie, we're almost out of time and we've come to our lightning round of questions, short, sharp answers. Give me an AI governance mistake you repeatedly see at board level.
Treating AI as a tech decision rather than a business strategy decision. So the boards that are approving the budget, but then delegate the accountability and then wonder why there's no ROI.
What's one leadership trait that will define successful AI era organizations?
Intellectual curiosity, that willingness to keep asking the right questions, challenging the assumptions, learning continuously. I'm 59. I've been in this sector and in tech for 35 years, and I'm on a journey of constantly learning.
What's the myth about AI transformation?
The myth is that the AI adoption isn't primarily about the tech. It's not. It's about the people. It's about the process. It's about the governance. Tech is actually relatively easy. The hard part, and this is where I see a lot of organizations falling down, is the culture, the organizational change, the mindset. And I build that into my scorecard for success that a lot of companies are gamifying at the moment.
And finally, one policy shift healthcare regulators must make in the next 5 years.
I would say moving from being a principle-based guidance to having enforceable standards. That's really important. So the principles are really important, but without the teeth, the things that are really going to change behavior, we won't be moving that needle. So I think as a sector, healthcare absolutely needs the clear, the auditable AI standards. Otherwise, the consequences are there for non-compliance.
Katie, it's been a fascinating conversation full of the nuance and depth that our listeners love. Thank you for coming on and for sharing your insights. Where can organizations go to find your work, read your books, and connect with you?
Thank you, Randy. A real pleasure. My website, aiinbusiness.co.uk, is the place to go, because there they can see the keynotes, they can see the 3 books, particularly the most recent one. Very happy to connect with everybody. You can find me on LinkedIn very easily. But I'd say aiinbusiness.co.uk is that focal point. Very happy to give your listeners a 25% discount code. If any of them want to get a copy of the book again, they can access that through that website as well.
Fantastic. And to our listeners, if this episode sharpened how you think about AI governance and what it actually takes to build an organization that can absorb it without breaking, share it with one person in your network who needs to hear it today. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow us on LinkedIn. All links are in the show notes. I'm Dr. Randeep. This is TechDental, and we'll see you next week. You've been listening to the TechDental podcast, Strategic Intelligence for Dental Leaders Navigating Structural Change. If you're responsible for growth, performance, or long-term value in this industry, make sure you're subscribed. I'm your host, Dr. Randeep. We'll see you next week.